Hello, Phil Zuckerman here, and I want to do a video today about using modes in basic blues and rock music. Again, my approach is to try to make things simple to start with, and for people that are playing for fun and recreation. And the modes can be a confusing thing, and you're probably already using modes without realizing it. What I want to start with is the major scale, the do-re-mi scale, has a formula of whole steps and half steps. It's whole step, whole, half, whole, 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 half. When you change the distance between each note, whether it's a half step or a whole step, you can come up with a lot of different variations, and they can either be called scales or modes. Modes are different in that when you play a certain shape on the guitar, you can actually play all 7 modes using that one shape just by starting on a different finger as your beginning note. And as you do that, you're changing the distance between one note to the next, whether it's a half step or a whole step. Technically, if you're playing a song in the key of A and you're using a minor pentatonic and the chord switches to a D, even though you're using some of the same notes, technically you're playing a D scale of some sort now, or a D mode. And that can get pretty confusing, so I stay away from that. It gives me a headache. We're going to start with the minor pentatonic in the key of A, the 5th fret, since most blues is using the minor pentatonic. And to review that, on the 1st string we have the 8th fret, 5th, same thing on the 2nd, 7 and 5 on the next 3 strings. Top and bottom are always the same, so I go back to 8, 5. I first want to look at the Dorian mode, and again we're looking at a shape, and all we have to do is add one more note to each string except for the 5th string. And one thing that helps me to remember Dorian is the word double Dorian. We're doubling the same fingering on the first 2 strings and the middle strings. On the first 2 strings we're going to add what would be the 3rd finger note. We're doing 8, 7, 5. On the next 2 strings we're going to do the 2 notes in the regular minor pentatonic and then slide down to the 4th fret. The 5th string stays the same, 7, 5. And the top is always the same as the bottom, 8, 7, 5. It has a little more of a classical sound to it than the pentatonic, which is kind of a crude caveman sound. And if you do a lick that, like Santana likes to do this lick with double pull-offs on the 1st string. Could you say you're using the Dorian mode? Sure, because you're using the 2nd note of the scale and you're adding that to your pentatonic. The way I look at these is as passing notes. You're just adding a note here or there to the notes that are in the basic pentatonic scale. And a lot of the time it ends up being notes that you would add or play if you were doing a particular mode. I could do a lick like this using some slides. So there I'm using the 2nd note of the scale and the 6th note of the scale. thing you can do is if you play a lick and you're doing something a little jazzy like Moon Dance, Van Morrison has kind of a jazzy sound. If you play a lick and end on one of those passing notes, it has a pretty cool sound too. The next mode I want to look at is the aeolian mode, because it's the same thing except we're only changing one note. Instead of the third finger note on the second string, we're changing that to a second finger note. The third finger note is the sixth note of your scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we're flatting that to a second finger note. And then we're doing the same thing in the lower octave, and to do that we're going to switch from doing the same strings on the same notes on the fifth string to doing the same notes on the fourth string in the minor pentatonic. So the first string is 8, 7, 5, second string is 8, 6, 5, third string is 7, 5, 4, fourth string is just 7, 5, and then the top two are going to do the same thing that the first string did, 8, 7, 5. I missed that on the way back up. Since they're both minor sounding scales, how do you know which one to use in a given song? In other words, how do you know whether to emphasize the flatted sixth note or the regular sixth note? One way to do that is to look at the chord changes. If you're doing a song that, say we're in A minor, and it goes to the 4 chord, and your 4 chord is D major, if you look at the note I'm holding on the second string, it's the 7th fret. That means the Dorian shape is going to fit with that particular song. If the 4 chord is D minor, now I'm holding the second finger note on the second string, which is the flatted 6, and that means the aeolian will fit better with that. The aeolian is actually the same as the natural minor scale. And there's a couple Santana songs you can mess around with that. One of them is Evil Ways. That uses a 1 minor to a 4 major. It might be in the key of G, I don't remember, but you can, once you find your key, you can mess around with the Dorian mode with that. And Black Magic Woman, which I think is in D minor, uses a minor for the 4 chord. So then you could experiment with using that flatted 6 to improvise over that song. Let's look at mixolydian. The mixolydian is a major scale, your do, re, mi scale, and you're just flatting the 7th note instead of, and again you can get kind of a jazzy for a major. Now what I was just doing there was actually combining notes of major and minor, and when you think of mixolydian, you can think of that, you're mixing major and minor. The main note or notes that you're dealing with there is when you go from the 5th fret on the 3rd string, which is your minor 3rd that you find in the A minor pentatonic or scale, and then the 6th fret, which is the major 3rd of the scale, 1, 2, 3. Typically what players will do to make it fit better with a major chord is they'll either bend that 5th fret note up a half step, or they'll slide, or they'll do a hammer. So there I'm using minor, major, and then on the 2nd string There's that flatted 7th that's in the scale, and then my 6, which is in the major scale. So even if you're doing something like, in a way you're doing mixolydian because you're mixing major and minor notes. And then the next one is the Ionian, which is the major scale. I don't really run into that a whole lot in rock and blues, but one thing that's kind of interesting is you can take our Dorian shape, and if you move it 2 frets higher to the 7th fret, you can get A major. The root note is the 10th fret on the 2nd string, and the 7th fret on the 4th string. I'm sorry. Another scale that's used, well, the remaining scales are not really, or modes are not really used very much. You have the phrygian. You find that more in maybe classical or metal music, but if you want to mess with it, you take that same Dorian shape, move it 2 frets lower. And what you're doing there is you have a flatted 2nd, a flatted 3rd, a flatted 6th, a flatted 7th. The last two, you know, you have the Locrian, which is a flat 2, a flat 3, a flat 5, a flat 6, a flat 7. And I don't think I've ever used that in my life. If I have, it was by accident. And the same thing for Lydian. Lydian is a major scale with a sharp 4. So you would have... Now that distance between the 1 and that sharp 4 is called a tritone. And you probably recognize it. So it is used in some music to create some dissonance, but you'll run into it once in a while, but not a whole lot. So the main point I'm trying to get across here is that you've probably played licks that you could say are using some of the modes. And you don't have to play through the whole shape in order to say, I just played a particular mode. You can just add some of these notes to the pentatonic scale and get the flavor of those modes without having to drive yourself crazy about all this stuff. Just think in terms of melodies. Aeolian mode. And that's a good exercise to do, is to take a song you're familiar with and see if you can flesh out the melody. Very good ear training to do that. It's almost the same as putting on a guitar solo and trying to figure out the solo by ear. It's real good training. So I hope that helps clear up a little bit with modes. There's plenty of information on the web if you want to get into it in more detail and learn all the 7 positions and all up and down the neck for more progressive music. But if you're just playing for fun and recreation and just want to throw in a few things here and there, you can do it without having to think, well, I'm stupid because I don't know the modes. Well, you probably are already playing the modes, like I said, so I wouldn't worry about that too much. Jimi Hendrix didn't know a thing about modes. So just play and have fun, and don't get too stressed out. Until next time, take care.